years ago, where there was a sort of spree for this surrounding this news tool, which allowed many to have their struggle being known beyond their borders, having their struggle, collaborating with other struggles from the region. We've seen that spree is dying because civil society actors of that spree are being tracked, are being arrested, are being killed, their voices being suppressed. And not only their voices, but also the voice of the entire society, civil society, specifically through censorship and specifically through internet shutdowns. I wanted to show a video, but screen a video, but I'm not sure that the technique is ready. No? What does that mean? No. Okay. Sorry, it's not possible, but we recently, our team in Chad recently went to film, to shoot, interviews of what it's like to live without internet, because, as I was saying yesterday, and as it was reminded by someone in the audience, the country has been living without access to social media, aka access to internet, because we all know that, well, most of the internet traffic in this country go and pass through messaging apps and social media platforms. So we made these interviews, and yes, most of the people were saying exactly the same thing. They are killing us because they're killing our voices. They're killing our ability to work. They're killing our ability to create opportunities for ourselves. So there is indeed, well, the state of affairs is quite worrying. We definitely need to fight back. I mean, there's no other word. Like I was saying yesterday, when rights are infringed to that extent, it's important to fight back. And yes, what we are looking to do now is continue to foster collaborations, ask, well, for everyone's support. Like in Cameroon, the support from the community was so important. I mean, we felt that we were not alone in the struggle, and I think that's part of how we managed to some extent overcome the censorship that we have been living. But yes, there needs, well, the region does need solidarity from other places in the continent, because it's really bad.
Thanks, Julie. So I'm going to open this following question to whoever takes it up first, just for us to get a sense of the issues around access as a digital right, because I think there's still quite a number of barriers. What is the situation like in your respective regions? Infrastructure development and policy, as well as implementation of that policy in ensuring that there is actually a realistic bridging of the digital divide.
I'll go first. Okay, so within the Anglophone West Africa, like I said earlier, that sometimes the realities are different even in each country that make up the region. But of course, there are common denominators all across. In terms of access to digital rights, for example, what I've noticed, especially since I started focusing on other countries in the region like Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia, Ghana, what I've noticed is that issues of digital rights is more like a pattern issue, even for activists. You hardly find, and let me include Nigeria in that number as well, because a lot of people in this room will agree with me that until very recently, it was almost as if it was only Paradigm Initiative that was talking about digital rights in Nigeria. A lot of other partners have started talking about it. But just this morning when I was thinking about this panel, I think one of the issues that I think that needs to be highlighted is even the fact that there's something we call side hustle. A lot of people working on digital rights, even in the region, it's more like a side hustle for them. There are other things they are focused on. So you see a traditional press freedom organization, then who also engage on digital rights issue. And I think that goes to tell a lot about how much the citizens are able to understand and assess this right. I was having a conversation with one of the journalists that attended this event yesterday of Nigerian origin, and he was telling me that this whole digital right thing, I don't understand it, I need more explanation and all of that. So I think there is that problem of lack of understanding of what it even means in the first place. I've had to appear on radio, on television to define what digital rights means, to as much as possible give elementary definition. And that's why when we're having the conversation the other time, I was saying that, you know what, let's limit this conversation to issues around privacy and freedom of expression that people already have an idea about. So I think basically people a lot of people have not come to terms with the reality of digital rights violation and so on. Especially if you are from West Africa, not until recently where we had the case of Sierra Leone shutting down the internet after the last election, and probably the experience with Jammeh in Gambia. We've not had the amount of experience that countries like Ethiopia or what we are seeing in North Africa. So not a lot of people are paying enough attention to digital rights issue in Anglophone West Africa. I think we are relaxing a lot. I think also that a lot of these issues are not being brought to the fore. I was having a conversation just this morning with a colleague from Ghana, because over the years, Ghana have put out positive numbers, positive feedback, and we almost have come to the conclusion that Ghana is doing amazingly well, like the shining light of the region. But I was asking a peculiar question because of the advantage that I have, that I live in Nigeria, there are information that I have about digital rights violation in Nigeria that you will never see in any reports, because these things are never put out there. But because you have friends, you have old school mates who work either with the DSS, the National Security Advisors Office, or who work with the Regulatory Commission, so there are things that are going on under G as we see this that will never be reported, and then we can assume that policy and all that. So I was asking that question with the context with Ghana, because Ghana has put out a lot of positive vibes, and we always look at them as shining light of the region. So I was trying to get perspective that apart from what is being measured, what is seen, what is the feel like as somebody who lives in Ghana in terms of, for example, one of the issues we talked about is the transparency. What's the relationship between the regulators and their government? Are there transparency reports? How is the relationship between the security agencies and telecom companies? How is that relationship managed? Do you have accountability? And it's also important to highlight that a country like Ghana are still not, they still don't have what is the equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act in Nigeria. It's yet to be passed in Ghana. They have this right to information bill that they have been working on for a while, which has not been passed. So I don't know how much information people have about what is actually going in a country like Ghana, for example. But we can look at Sierra Leone and see we shut down the internet after the last election. You can look at Gambia and say, oh, Jammeh did a lot. And we can look at Gambia again, as even after the new president came, a lecturer was recently arrested for expressing an opinion about the president. So I think in terms of access to digital rights, in terms of how much people even know or even exercise that right, I think we are not doing well yet. We are very far behind.
Aisha, in terms of infrastructure development, access in terms of infrastructure development, do you see any growth in as far as trying to bridge the digital divide?
In terms of infrastructure, talking always about Tunisian context, in terms of infrastructure, we are in the halfway. We have
to the last 3 points. We have 14 million mobile subscribers, and we have 46 access to internet. So we are still in the way of developing our infrastructure. We also suffer from digital divide between the urban and rural areas in Tunisia. So that's why the understanding, to relate to what Adeboy said, the understanding of digital rights is really important, and it is lacking in Tunisian context, because it is, yes, there are a lot of organizations working on digital rights in advocacy campaigns and through social networks and all of that stuff. But there is also a really wide gap and a wide range of people who do not understand what is digital right. And the fact, another issue is that digital rights are improving, because also risks in internet are improving, and every day there's a
a new obstacle and a new challenge on cyberspace. So there is also the problem of the implementation of the legal text. Yeah, it's fine to have legal text and it's fine to have freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution, but the most challenging fact is that how to implement and how to practice these rights. At times in Tunisia, we had challenges. We had bloggers which were sentenced to prison because of criticizing the regime. We had also bloggers who who were exiled. So, to sum up, I think the real challenge is not only infrastructure, it's the awareness, and people need to know what do they have as rights, what are the limitations, and where do they start, and where do they stop.
Right, so Julie, this, I think there's been an assertion that Access would really look at infrastructure development and cost issues, but I think one of the issues that is often not put in or considered in the Access debate is issues around gender and sexual minorities. Would you like to speak to that in respect of Access?
Yes, gender is indeed, I think there is a session later today on digital inclusion being the most important right. At Internet Without Borders, we totally agree with that. There's no point in talking about digital rights if you don't have any access to the digital first. So there is still a lot to be done in terms of access, especially access of women. We've been working with the Web Foundation, and the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which works a lot on digital inclusion and gender. And 3 years ago, we published a study, so we focused on Cameroon, but the study covered, the research covered many countries. We found out that the inequalities that we know of in the real world, so that is to say, inequalities between men and women in terms of income, in terms of opportunities, are replicated in the almost exact proportions online. So it means that even in terms of access to internet, there is a huge gap, which some countries try to what's the word in English? Sorry, this morning is combler la fracture numérique. How do you say? Comment tu dis? So fill the gap. Fill the gap. Yes, thank you. Yeah, trying to fill the gap, the connectivity gap. And but there's still a lot to be done. I read a study recently, so by the Web Foundation, on universal service access funds, which are absolutely almost not used by government. These funds are supposed to, finance infrastructure development, especially in rural areas, but not only. And most of these funds are not used by many governments on the continent. So there is, even before talking about digital rights, there is indeed the need to talk about access to those rights, so access to the digital, and specifically access of, women and sexual minorities. So there has been improvements compared to 3 years ago, but there's still a lot to be done, especially since we need to, one of the sustainable development goals is to have, women and men being able to access to opportunities online, and we are quite far from that for now.
Okay, thanks. And then Jeff, lastly, you would be access and cost in relation to content distribution. Do you feel that the situation in your region allows for the online to be an alternative to the mainstream in terms of people accessing information?
Well, thank you. I think, first of all, the digital divide between the rural and poor is still wide. The infrastructure, I think, is still doing bad because I think majority citizens in the region live in rural areas where there is no electricity, where if the electricity is there, the cost of internet is a little high compared to the poverty levels, because I think in the region maybe about 45 or 50% total population live below the poverty line. So if really the internet is expensive, we find it people really can't find means of getting connected. But even those that try to use internet, they probably are there. Maybe I can say we're still celebrating the honeymoon. People really are on social media or just to socialize, like you hear the social media, just socialize. But even when you find that what is really is what attracts more kind of conversation or debate, these are issues, of course, that do not pertinently look at issues of governance or whatever. It's about really some social issues. But of course, we can understand, because where we're coming from, the media, the traditional media, I think, has faced challenges. For information, the regulator in the region, who was once responsible for the traditional media licensing, allocating frequency, we went beyond. The government is strengthening the digital capacity of security installations across the country. So this has nothing to do with, of course, helping citizens really to get to online, and then, but of course, when there are threats, when the media have been, traditional media has been shut down, when journalists have been arrested, when there is habitual closure of media houses, of course, you find most citizens want to go online, especially those in urban centers. But even when they get there, automatically there are issues, of course, with fear. But you find, I think, online has probably remained maybe a little bit relevant space for citizens really if they want to speak up their mind. But even when you get there, you find that even all the government, like I said earlier, the governments in the region, they are using the same service provider, ZTE. You find ZTE is in Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and China is investing heavily in the East African region. But of course, even bringing cheaper phones, which of course is enabling. Like we had the African Union headquarters, how the information has been stored and then taken back to Beijing. The same, of course, they are using telecom companies, which are supposed to be really doing independent work, just to ease. Like for instance, in Uganda, telecom companies are supposed to be recording and storing all the what goes either via phone, via voice or data, and can be availed upon request. So all that, of course, whereas there will be good motives, of course, to work towards to control that space, like that even when citizens, because I think the North Africa, the Arab Spring, has a lot of learning, particularly in the West African region, where you find the fear, you say, oh, if we increase access, what is going to happen? Are we not going to see citizens really raising up to say, no, please go? So all that really is in their minds, and letting this widening the access, I think is the question.
Okay, thanks. So that's Jeff closing the session, insinuating that the governments are hesitant to increase access because it would increase civil participation. So for the last 10 minutes, I'm going to open up for questions. I'm going to take 5 questions, and I shall not hesitate to stop the person who decides to give a comment before the question, because we've only got 10 minutes. So I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, Frederico. So we have just 4 questions. Okay. No comments, just questions, so that we can engage first. So if we get 4 questions first, then we'll just have 2 comments at the end. So Jesse, you'll get the 5th question. There's the first one.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike from Michael, and also the foundation. Yeah, I want to comment this concerns. Yeah, my question though is the role of technology in accessing of internet development. I know, for example, most Nigerians, they use their smartphone on accessing. Like most of the mobile communication, if you're able to load, they give you a free megabytes. So it's also a contributor. That means that the technology also contributes to internet accessibility. Then the cost tariffs. I want the speaker to, because in different countries we have the cost tariffs quite different. So I want them to elaborate on that. Why is it that maybe in Ghana it's high, whether in other countries? Finally, my journalists, I want to stand in your shoe. Presently here now, print media is out, is going out, and that's affecting the businesses of most of the newspapers. What is your own take about that? The cost of increment of internet is also another area whereby people cannot access, whereby most of the mobile communication, they are finding it difficult. So what is your take home? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that's for you, Jeff, on sustainability of print media and cost. There's a question on technology and how it affects awareness on digital rights. And then there's the differences in tariffs. Yeah? Second question. Yeah?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the update by Julie Renaud. I am Rigobert Kemoni, I come from Cameroon. I am a junior researcher for ParadigmHQ. As I think for update in Francophone Africa, before asking a question, please let me present some element.
No, we're not going to let you do that. We have 10 minutes. Can we have a question? Can we have your question?
Just a question.
Yes, just a question, please.
Okay. Let me ask my question in French, please. Alors, Julie, sur la question de droits numériques en Afrique francophone de manière globale, nous sommes sans ignorer que la plupart des États actuellement n'ont pas encore décidé sur la législation sur la liberté de l'Internet. Il y a quelques pays qui s'avancent, notamment dernièrement le Sénégal, mais pour le cas du Cameroun par exemple, du Tchad, où il y a un vide juridique, ça crée de la jurisprudence. Seule la loi sur la cybercriminalité est utilisée et cette loi traque fortement ceux-là qui utilisent Internet. Dans ces mêmes pays où il n'y a pas de loi sur la liberté de l'Internet, on a constaté que c'est dans ces pays qu'il y a assez de violence en ligne. Je parle du cas du Cameroun, je parle du cas du Tchad. Alors, quelle est la stratégie pour l'Afrique francophone de ramener l'ensemble des pays? Je sais que le Niger a déjà fait un premier pas et que le projet de loi qui doit être adopté peut être un exemple pour l'ensemble des pays francophones. Mais il faut distinguer il faut comprendre que les pays francophones ont un problème au niveau du droit français qui est différent du droit anglo-saxon. Alors, Julie, vous qui travaillez sur la question, quel sera le parallèle? Comment est-ce qu'on peut créer l'intersection entre le droit anglo-saxon et le droit public français qui est utilisé par les pays francophones pour pouvoir créer une législation normale pour l'Internet en Afrique francophone? Je crois que c'est ce que je voulais dire. De manière générale, il faut rappeler qu'en Afrique francophone, il y a 8 pays parmi les 30 en Afrique francophone qui ont été menacés par la liberté de l'Internet pendant ces derniers mois. Julie a parlé des questions en ligne. La Tunisie a fait par exemple pour les questions gays en ligne. Par exemple, en ouvrant un tribunal tunisien dont une radio gay en ligne était fermée, a demandé à cette radio d'ouvrir. Donc c'était ma contribution, merci.
Thank you, comrade, but I don't think we got your question. What is your question? Because it sounded like comments.
My question, quelle est la stratégie pour créer l'intersection entre le droit anglo-saxon, puisque l'Internet est né dans le monde anglo-saxon et se développe encore dans le monde francophone? Comment peut-on créer l'intersection entre le droit public français utilisé en Afrique francophone et le droit anglo-saxon pour qu'il y ait pour légiférer la liberté de l'Internet? C'est la question.
Okay, thank you. Julie, you got that question. Yeah. We'll get one more question, and please can we not have a comment? Can we just have direct the question so we give the speakers time to respond?
Good morning. My name is Alexander Otutu. My question is, how has the internet users in Africa contributed to the slow pace of the processes of achieving digital rights in the continent?
The panelists. Julie, maybe we can start with your question.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't get the last question, so I may not be able to. Okay. Thank you.
I'm asking that how has the internet users in Africa contributed to the slow pace and the processes of achieving digital rights in the continent? How have they actually contributed to not we being able to achieve digital rights in Africa?
Yeah.
Because even if we're talking about the government, how has the citizens also contributed?
Right.
Thank
so for
you.
you, I think you'd also be able to.
Yeah.
So very quick responses, guys.
So I'll respond then to the question on bridging the legal gap between French legal systems, French-inspired legal systems in Africa to catch up with Anglophone countries. I don't think in terms of digital rights there is such thing as Francophone or Anglophone system. I think these rights are inspired from international conventions that were adopted by almost all the countries in the world, which are related to freedom of expression, privacy, and which are contained in various of the international texts that we know of, such as the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights and many others. So we do think that these rights translate exactly in the same way on digital issues. So there is not, we don't think there is a need for additional creativity to adapt them in the French system. It's just a question of political will. And on that, it's in the hands of those who govern. There are very interesting trends coming from West Africa, the ECOWAS, Francophone countries, which are members of the ECOWAS, which are trying to harmonize the rights issues related to the digital, although they are very, very creative in terms of dealing with criminal aspects and cybersecurity aspects, but not that much on digital rights aspects. So there is a room for that. There is also already a will to harmonize, at least in West Africa, so definitely Central Africa has to catch up with that space and with those practices. And yes, there's definitely room for improvement, and Nigeria is part of ECOWAS, so there's definitely, probably another responsibility for Nigeria or Ghana even to inspire other countries, French-speaking countries.
Thanks, Julie. Quickly, Aisha, you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add regarding the same question. Actually, I don't think, I agree with Julie, I don't think it's a question of difference between Francophone digital rights and Anglophone digital rights. The problem lies in the lack of content in French countries, in French-speaking countries. 27 French-speaking countries, African, do not have content related to IG, related to rights, freedoms, digital rights. So that's why awareness is lacking. So the real effort is to provide this content, which in itself will provide knowledge of the rights.
Boye, I think particularly the one on what the citizens themselves are contributing.
The role of citizens, I think I related with my first the apathy first, and secondly, okay. So first I spoke about the apathy. Sometimes lack of interest from citizens, but I think the one that I think of the most important one, in my opinion, is the fact of our historical experiences, whereby we've come to accept certain things as normal. So your rights are violated, your privacy rights. You read in the news that your government has purchased surveillance technology, and they will now be able to monitor your phone conversations and all of that. There is no outreach because it feels normal. We came from a background and history of, being led by military government dictatorship that clamped down on everybody. So I think on the part of the citizen, we need to wake up and realize that we are not a democracy and that we need to ask for certain rights, and if you don't ask for it, it will not be given to you. So I think it's just that thing that we need to get on, that we have new realities and we need to embrace it.
So there's also issues around self-policing and citizens actually assisting. So when you look within the trends in Zimbabwe, the 2016 report, Digital Rights Report by Paradigm Initiative, most of the arrests, the citizens actually reported each other to the police over WhatsApp, message that was distributed, who mobilized what. So those are some of the issues also. Jeff, the issue around sustainability of the print media?
Well, I think this is it's both political, but at the same time a professional issue, because globally, I think traditional media is struggling. In the region, for instance, in Eastern Africa, I think the media houses, in the interest of governments, have been reduced to business entities. You've forgotten that these were supposed to be really platforms for where voices of citizens can be aired or disseminated for any government to listen. So because even the business, economic-wise, our economies are not really doing well. So you find media houses are really surviving on government money in terms of sponsorship. So you find that it's a little hard for one to bite a hand that's really him or her. That's why you've seen really media houses being compromised. And I think this is really a big problem in the entire region, where you find politicians are behind media outlets, which of course for them, one, they're looking at using that really to achieve their goals politically, but at the same time to do business. And leaving out, even when you do a quick sample across Africa, I think the least department in these media outlets really to get facilitation and newsrooms. So journalists really receive little money to be able to do investigative work. And that, of course, puts again to us as the professionals on what we need to do, whether either we salvage ourselves and have media houses, but even in a bad economy, we have seen, for instance, in Uganda, we have one of the media houses called Observer, is owned by journalists, but it is shrinking because, one, they are struggling to sustain themselves. But of course, the competition of faster-hand information on social media, the media houses are trying to find means of sustaining themselves, but because they sell on the street cannot sustain media to survive. So the economies and then the politics has really a big issue. So I think the professions have got to go back on the drawing table and see how we remain relevant in this competition. Because if the Guardian, if the New York Post, they are really struggling on how to sustain, either to phase out hard copies and then deliver news on digital platforms. I think that is really the same thing. But ours, I think it's really in a bad shape because it is a little hard to survive beyond that.
Right, and now just add to say that I don't think there's been much reflection by the print media or even the broadcast media in terms of their sustainability in the digital era. So what partnerships do you make with private companies such as Facebook and with your local service provider to get a special data bundle for public information or content that you produce so that it is accessible? So that would actually deal with the cost issues related to how do the citizens also prioritize what is news and which platform that they will follow. So Jessica, your hand was up, and then you had one other hand, I think it was Federico. Those were the last two. So you're done, okay. Then you had a comment? Yeah, so Jessica and then the last comment. Where's the mic? Yeah, and then just the last one.
So I just was thinking, and especially curious, I guess, listening to Julie talk about Francophone Africa, being from Lebanon, which is also a Francophone system legally, but, and I'm wondering, because we've been talking a lot about the states, but I'm wondering if there are content moderation issues with the platforms in Africa, and specifically if they're around, like how deep are they around issues of opposition to governments, and just sort of what's going on in terms of internet freedom vis-a-vis content moderation, people's content being taken offline, etc. So it's maybe too large a question, but it's something that I didn't hear on the panel.
Yeah, so I would probably have the panelists just share experiences within your context of content takedown challenges, with the platforms themselves. That's what her question is. Then there was one last comment, yeah? You said you had a comment. Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that in the context of Malawi, the internet...
Can it be very short?
Pretty much. People are not safe on the internet. Maybe I'll make it very brief, in the sense that you see that with the coming in of social media and other platforms, the fact that we don't have policies and legislations to protect people or the government. The government is investing heavily into machinery that they are saying they will use to monitor the quality of service providers in terms of the internet or mobile communications. But the truth behind that is that they are investing heavily into machinery or technology that they can use to survey, for surveillance, pretty much, for political purposes, because they are realizing that social media or new media is a force that can threaten their own existence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last comment?
I have a ton of things to ask and comment on, but I'm just going to streamline to two things. I'd like to find out, in advocating for digital rights, what has really been the level of engagement with the judicial officers that are going to interpret the laws around digital rights? I'm asking because judging from the Cambridge Analytica incident that happened a few weeks ago, and following through the stories, I observed that nobody in Congress really understood what Mark Zuckerberg was saying the entire time. And so we are replicating something similar in Nigeria and in other West African countries. And it's important because when you have rights, the only way your rights can be strengthened is when you know that you can get adequate redress. And it's only, at this level, it's only the courts that offer that. I was going through the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill a couple of weeks, and even yesterday, and I observed that it's just the Human Rights Commission that is empowered to administer it. But you would find that futuristically, the EFCC will get in, the police will get in, the DSS will get in a bid to administer this same legislation. So what exactly are we doing to ensure that judges are supposed to be in this room listening to this conversation? They're supposed to be representatives from the police, they're supposed to be representatives from the DSS, because a couple of days ago, a governor was threatening somebody on Twitter. He had posted something anonymously, and he said, "I will find you out." And so all of that is all tongue-in-cheek when we sit here and have these fancy conversations. But in reality, if they arrest the guy in Ogbomoso or in some remote area, there's not really going to be anybody to help him at the end of the day, because they will wield their power and root him down. So I don't know, I'd like to just hear what's being done in America. Thank you.
Okay, so that's two questions. The last one being, how inclusive are our advocacy efforts? Are we including the judiciary, law enforcement, in terms of them understanding digital rights issues? The first one, Jessica's, was on content takedown, the experiences or just shared experiences around content takedowns in the regions.
Yes. Rapidly on the question on how civil society include and work with the judiciary, we've got a very good example coming from Cameroon, where Internet Without Borders and Access Now, another organization, filed a lawsuit against the government on the issue of internet shutdown. And we basically sent an amicus brief to the judge, constitutional judge and a civil judge, explaining to them the concept of digital rights, because it's a quite new concept even for the judiciary for the judiciary in the world, I would say. But yes, we try to explain the concept of digital rights, and specifically the concept of access to internet being a fundamental right. So that's one way we started engaging with the judiciary. And now in content moderation, the issue from our perspective is that, first of all, there needs to be enough reports of content being taken down. People who have their content being taken down need to report it, but they don't, not that much. And that relates to the issue of, citizens, the role of citizens in the state of digital, their own digital rights. So there is definitely a work to be done, and that's what we are doing now and other organizations in order to, insist and stress on the importance of digital rights, and that it's wrong for your content to be taken down without you knowing why it's being taken down. And that's why the new community centers of Facebook, for instance, are very important, because they leave more space for, first of all, transparency, for people to ask why my content was being taken down and the reasons precisely for it to be taken down. And also, there are contents, there are certainly requests from the government, but transparency reports, once again, from social media until very recently were not that, precise. So we couldn't, there was no way for us to get data on that. But we do know that there are indeed content being taken down, but we hear of them, through friends, so it's not sufficient to have, some substantive data.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add quickly?
In terms of content, takedown, Tunisia has witnessed 2 points of declared points of incidents of shutdown during the first one during the revolution, because social network and social media played a crucial role in eradicating and launching the revolution. So the government had to shut down certain websites and certain pages and websites and content to stop the flow of the revolution and the protestations. The second point is when we entered into an era of fight against terrorism. So terrorist groups and terrorists went to cyberspace, used cyberspace to recruit fighters. So the government had to sacrifice freedom for security of its people. So it had to shut down certain content. That's it.
Yeah, I'd like to talk quickly about the 2 questions that were asked. First, about content takedown. I think there was a particular experience in Nigeria where about 21 websites were taken down. But one of those websites is very famous, and we had thought that the organization was going to be willing to, ask questions and all of that. We stepped up, we wanted to take the matter to court, and we asked the organization to kind of work with us. We were going to. But what we noticed was that it was even the organization that was saying, please let's play. We are trying to negotiate with the government and all of that. And that reflects back to what I said earlier, where people take it is normal for government to do certain things, and even when you have an opportunity to seek redress, you are checking out, you are not even exploring that possibility. So that is first, the importance of even content owners to be able to ask questions and seek redress where necessary, and cooperate with civil society when we offer support in that regard. Secondly, the second thing that Chukwuma raised, it's a very, very important point, because let me use this opportunity to talk about the work that ParadigmHQ has done in that regard. Last year, we started to engage with security agencies. We had focused workshop on digital rights with security agencies, and they were very interesting conversations, because some of them even led to heated arguments and all of that. But what is striking is that it was almost like for participants at that workshop, they were senior officers. We noticed that was the first time anybody ever was engaging them on those subjects, which means they never understood those issues and all of that. So that kind of presented an opportunity. And lastly, talking about judges, I think you're absolutely right, because the first court case that ParadigmHQ took to court, the judge said, why are you interested in this issue? You are just being busybodies. Because the judge didn't see any reason why you should be asking questions about surveillance and all of that. So I agree with you that we need to engage judiciary, and from ParadigmHQ perspective, it is in our program, it's in our plan. Once we find the resources, we are going to make sure we do that. We've done a series of those workshops. and judiciary is our next target. And I think we all need to embrace that and focus a lot more on it, because at the end of the day, they're the one that will interpret the law.
So thank you to my panelists. Let's give a round of applause to a very knowledgeable and diverse panel this morning. Thank you so much, and thank you all for the questions.
All right, thank you very much. You're going to take pictures up here. But ladies and gentlemen, so this is the time you choose what breakout section you want to go to. Don't forget, you have 2 sessions you can choose from right now. There is using research as a tool to determine if and how companies respect human rights. You also have digital inclusion in Africa, the most important rights. Those are the breakout sessions happening right here, or rather right now. Then after that, immediately, gender, open data, and AI, intersecting for digital equality, and that will be at the same time as empowering human rights defenders in the digital era in Africa. If you have not had your tea, this is an opportunity for you to grab that. It is not, again, a tea break. Please just take your tea, make your way back to your seats if you're in this auditorium, or if you're going to the basement level, please make your way there. Announcement for sponsored delegates. Please bring all your receipts to Ihoma at the desk so your payments can start being processed. Sponsored delegates, please bring your receipts to the desk at the entrance there so your payments can begin to get processed. So let's move on to the next sessions, and we will try to maintain a schedule, 1:30 for lunch. All right, good morning again.
Sometimes people have to be shaken.
So you're one of those analysts.
You gave it all for me. To live for you completely. You gave it all for me. I give my all to you, Jesus, to you. Gave it all for me, Jesus. I'm not gonna start like this. Before you go So now they come. Everybody go walk now. Everybody go walk. This will happen. Come on, speak. One man. No card. You and that person. No, do you like it? Say feeling.
Okay, stay.
Somebody unplug it and kill it. I think this is full, right? I'm not sure. With the green? Yeah. With the green.
It's full.
Yeah. You want to remove it? Why not unplug it here? Plug that one there. Plug that one there. Bring your phone there.
I should bring mine here. I'm closer here because I'm going to be doing live updates with my phone. Which charger is it?
That was the phone.
Yes, but I don't even know where he is because he was helping me with my phone. Yeah. His charger. I got his space here.
Okay, alright.
So maybe I should plug it back for your phone.
It's not like that. The other way. Yeah. Because you understand that. Okay, yeah, you. I know.
Paging Julie. Okay. Thanks for the extra few minutes. This session is using research as a tool to determine if and how companies respect human rights. Welcome. In this session, we're going to explore the value of research as an incremental step in the policy advocacy process, including looking at the sort of specificities of using research as a means to determine whether companies are respecting human rights. So we're going to focus on researching companies, but we'll also be talking a little bit more broadly about research, ICT policy research in general. I think I should mention that this session is organized by Ranking Digital Rights, which is an initiative that for the past 3 years has developed and applied a research methodology to evaluate the free expression and privacy commitments of 22 of the most powerful global internet, mobile, and telecom companies in its Corporate Accountability Index, the most recent 2018 edition of which was released just yesterday. And you can find it at rankingdigitalrights.org, or if you're following the IFF 2018 hashtag, I've also tweeted it, so you'll be able to find it very quickly. Originally, this session was going to be moderated by IFF Abrugi, who is the Corporate Accountability Editor at Ranking Digital Rights, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it to Abuja, so I agreed to fill in. I'm Jessica Deer. I'm the Executive Director of SMEX, an organization in Lebanon, and I'll be the moderator. So I was also wondering if I'm throwing a curveball here. I was wondering if I could recruit someone to take notes for this session so that I could share it back with Ranking Digital Rights at the end of the program. Would anybody be willing to do that? We can, yeah, I'll give you I don't know. A tweet, yes, my undying affection and a tweet. Yeah? Are you volunteering? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So before I introduce my colleagues, I'd first like to give a brief overview of the 2018 Corporate Accountability Index, which reviews 22 countries, as I said. So just in the spirit of sort of trying to be as interactive as possible, I'm going to read the 22 countries and keep count, companies, thank you. Keep count of how many of these companies actually somehow touch your daily life. Google, Microsoft, Oath, Facebook, Twitter, Kakao, which I think is a Korean company, Apple, Samsung, Yandex, Tencent, Mail.ru, and Baidu. And then of the telecom companies, Vodafone, AT&T, Telefonica, Orange, América Móvil, MTN, Bharti Airtel, Axiata, Etisalat, and Ooredoo. So how many people are affected by 10
10 of these companies somehow. Were you keeping count? No? No one can say 10? Yeah? Facebook, Microsoft, I would say, or 5 of these companies. Is anybody affected by 5? So that's a lot of companies. Just to give you a little incentive to investigate the report. So for each year, for the past 3 years, RDR researchers have applied a methodology that includes 35 indicators in 3 categories of governance. So for example, Google and Microsoft were the only companies in the index to score more than 60%. But neither company led the pack on every question, and each had 4 areas of performance. Interestingly, Facebook placed 4th in the index overall, but it performed poorly in relation to its peers on questions about its handling of user information, which is no surprise to us. But perhaps the results say that it improved transparency about government's requests for user information or lawful requests to restrict accounts and delete content. And there are other findings like that. So also there's an overall trend of companies increasing transparency and reporting on government demands, which I think Julie referred to in the last panel. But there's still a persistent lack of transparency by many companies in revealing how they use and even secure user data. So the report is online, as I mentioned, and includes lots of visualizations. You can also review the research methodology, all of the indicators, and all the data collected, including researchers' comments on that data on the website. You can also see a section called RDR Adaptations on the website, where organizations that have adapted the methodology to local or regional contexts are featured. And both Julie's organization, IFF, and my organization, SMEX, are in those adaptations. So, for the purposes of this panel, RDR and other company research initiatives have emerged as researching companies' commitments to human rights has become an increasingly important piece of the puzzle in advocating for digital rights and other internet regulation debates that are currently taking place worldwide. It's not news anymore that the scale of these companies often exceeds that of many states, and that their policies can be even farther reaching and at the same time much less transparent. Meanwhile, tech companies are notoriously difficult to research, keeping their processes and algorithms largely obscured behind the firewall of proprietary information. Their messaging is tight, and I'll ask you, just listen to how Facebook uses the word evolve as a verb. They're always saying, we evolved this policy, we evolved this product, we evolved. It's their way of sort of not saying that they needed to change something because it was wrong, but because they needed to evolve it. So, and it's across, I've seen Facebook presentations in many regions, many policy people. You start listening to the language and you see how tightly controlled their messaging is. And there's also no FOIA process or freedom of information requests for company secrets. So as researchers, we still can't let that be the end of the line, because how these giant multinational companies moderate content and handle user data will continue to be an essential factor in how much agency we can exercise as individuals from now and into the future, and as communities. Which brings me to our 2 panelists today. Julia Wono, you're very familiar with now as the Executive Director of Internet Without Borders, an organization defending digital rights and an open internet for all. And specifically, I'm going to talk to Julie today about the recent report that IFF published in relation to adapting the RDR methodology to the context of Kenya and Senegal. The report is called Digital Rights in Sub-Saharan Africa, and again, you can find it on the Ranking Digital Rights site. I didn't tweet these, but analysis, so it's Digital Rights in Sub-Saharan Africa, analysis of practices by Orange in Senegal and Safaricom in Kenya. And then Liz Arumbo, is a KICTANET ICT Policy and Communications Associate. And for the past 4 years, she's been working on internet-related public policy. Her main issues of interest have been research and advocacy on expression, privacy, security, and capacity building. And she's also an ICANN fellow and a member of the Non-Commercial Stakeholder Group. And Liz has also conducted research on company commitments to human rights, working with Global Partners Digital. And then finally, we thought we might be a little tricky today. So we have a third panelist, which is you, our audience. And we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the session. But during the session, we're also going to pull you on some of your research wisdom so that we can share together sort of how we're approaching these challenges. So to kick us off, Julie, can you tell us a little bit about the report that you did on Kenya and Senegal and Safaricom and I already forgot, it's Orange, or it's Orange, yeah. And what was the process like, and how, specifically, how do you see producing a report like this as a part of the larger policy advocacy process?
So indeed, we published in January this year a report on practices by Orange in Senegal and Vodafone Safaricom in Kenya. So before responding to your question, I would like to explain the rationale behind the choice to adapt this methodology. So we've seen that the Ranking Digital Rights Global Index ranks 22 companies and does that, well, there's a set of questions, I think 21 type of question, I don't remember, 35, okay, type of questions on several indicators. So you mentioned governance, freedom of expression, privacy. We realized that, well, most of the ranking and the questions asked were asked to the companies based on what they do, mostly based on what they do on their native markets, if we could talk that way, especially for telco operators. So specifically for Orange, how it opposed freedom of expression and privacy in France, in Europe, and Vodafone in the UK and Europe, which is where they are, they're nationals from these countries. But we also know that globalization is a reality, especially in the telecommunications sector, and that these multinationals do have subsidiaries in other parts of the world. So our rationale was really to have this globalization conversation, as we call it. So not only globalized services, but also globalized rights. And it's even more important now at this time when we're speaking. Why? Because we are seeing that globally, that's an assessment that's being made by many organizations, that there is a decrease, or at least a real challenge for democracy in the world. Democracy is decreasing, it's being challenged even in the oldest and most stable ones. So obviously in this illiberal world, there needs to be safeguards and people who uphold these safeguards. Obviously civil society has to play a role, but sometimes we don't have the means, the resources, enough resources to do that. So other layers of the society need to come in, and specifically companies, and specifically when we're talking about digital internet companies and telcos. Why is that? It's the whole concept of corporate social responsibility. You can not only make money, especially make money with data of users, as we're talking about internet companies in particular, but you also need to give back to the community, which helps you make that much money. So we wanted to see if indeed there had been a globalization of rights, and if these companies uphold rights, digital rights of Africans the same way they do with Europeans. And I must say that we were not disappointed because there is indeed a difference, which is even acknowledged by one of the companies which we assessed, which is in particular Orange Senegal. They put out a press release, a statement after we published our study. Basically our main findings for the study are the following. So first of all, these two companies, Orange in Senegal does not publish, or its terms and conditions are not accessible to the user. So why terms and conditions are important? Because it's basically the contract that you sign with the operator when you get your SIM card. So you need to know what you're allowed to do on the network of the operator, and specifically on what ground the operator can cut you out from the network. So we are thinking specifically about internet shutdowns, but not only. And secondly, Orange in Senegal does not publish its privacy policy. And why is it important is that because in Western Central Africa, we've seen so many examples of governments using databases, user databases of telcos to send unsolicited political messages, SMSs, to users, and that's problematic. So they don't publish a privacy policy. In the case of Safaricom, although they do publish terms and conditions, and they do have some, some provisions regarding privacy, those are not clear at all. They are very concise. They're quite vague. Basically, for instance, on the issue of network shutdown, Safaricom states that it reserves itself the right to shut down the network on the basis of any reason it deems fit. And that's problematic because we've seen recently that, well, a network being shut down is not science fiction on the continent, even in the strongest, in the most stable countries. And the reasons we also chose these two countries and these two companies is because they are leaders in their respective markets, and they're operating in countries considered among the most democratic ones on the continent, Senegal being one of the most stable democracy in West Francophone Africa, and Kenya is, well, now a well-established democracy on the continent. So it was important, and so the findings for Orange were these ones, so no publication of terms and conditions and privacy policy, and Safaricom vague terms and conditions and privacy policy. And why, okay, I was explaining the findings to, well, explain why Orange Senegal acknowledged that there was indeed a difference in the way they handle privacy and free expression of the users in Africa compared to how they handle it in Europe. The statement specifically said that this NGO is trying to apply concepts, European concepts, to African citizens and contexts. And again, I'm insisting on this. Privacy is non-negotiable. It's the same privacy everywhere. It doesn't matter what your personal relationship with that, but for a well-functioning and healthy democracy and rule of law, there needs to be privacy, full stop. There needs to be free expression, full stop. There's no concept, African concept or whatever. Otherwise, if you read, well, go and read African text and privacy and free expression, they're almost the same as international ones. So there's no, I mean, for us, it's not negotiable to say that, well, certain have rights to certain types of privacy and others have rights to other types of privacy. And it's even more nonsense with the way the network is functioning. The network, we're all interdependent. Yesterday we were talking in another session about the fact that there is no IXP in Africa, so for basically data to go from one point to another, you have to pass through Europe or the US. That's interconnectivity and interdependence. So it's the same thing for rights. We are interdependent. When our rights are not respected, Cambridge Analytica can test its product and go back to Europe and apply them. So why is it important, and why this research has been important for policy? It's the first of its kind on the continent that we're trying to assess how we're trying to apply CSR concepts and methodologies to the telecommunication sector and internet sector in particular. And it's important to do so because we've talked a lot about the fact that users themselves are sometimes, don't know about their rights, don't know that free expression online has exactly the same value as free expression offline. So research like these ones help put a finger on, problematic situations and issues, and help users and even ourselves understand where there needs to be where work needs to be done in terms of policy and digital rights. Why am I saying this? Is because we've made a number of recommendations, and these recommendations in this report do not only target companies, because obviously we understand that it's difficult to adapt to, the human rights. We understand it's a challenge for companies. They even need to make assessments for that. So we understand that it could be a challenge. But beyond that, there are other actors who have to play an important role in terms of policy and digital rights. And these actors are regulators and privacy authorities where they exist. we have found that these authorities and regulators sometimes are deprived of either knowledge or either means of action to fulfill their mission, I mean, at least the mission that were given to them. So we are making a recommendation to governments also and their regulators in order to adapt the legal framework to the challenges posed by the information in terms of digital rights. And we also, of course, make recommendations to civil society organizations and users and invite them more than ever to pay closely attention to their digital rights and educate themselves, raise their own awareness on these issues, because it's too important. I mean, if we want to have in Africa internet that allows, political change, economic empowerment, it has to be a free internet. There's no such thing as an internet not being free and giving opportunities to citizens. Some people will refer to China, but that's another debate. But personally, I don't think it's viable to live in a society where your state can recognize your face in the, in the street and send you a fine via SMS just because you've crossed the street when the traffic light was red. So we can debate on that, but basically, free is the beginning of the rest, the beginning of economic empowerment, the beginning of investment, economic stability, political stability, and democracy.
Great, thank you for that really comprehensive introduction. Before we move on, I have the same question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about the research into companies that you've done and how you see it as one step in the policy advocacy process?
Okay. I'm going to talk about how KIPTANET works first, and then I'll talk about our work with GPD around SMEs in Kenya. So KIPTANET works with 4 pillars, and one of them acts like a base through which these other ones function. So one pillar is the community platform, where we gather stakeholders, those are organizations and individuals interested in ICT policy discussion, to come and debate over ICT policy issues and provide alternative policy directions to policy problems as they arise. So again, here the stakeholders come from different stakeholder groups, and we are able to get rich discussions, and from there we also research and pick what stakeholders would like policymakers to focus their priorities on. Because remember, most of the policymakers act on a representative basis, so they come back to the stakeholders or their constituencies to see what issues they would like them to focus on. Another pillar is on advocacy. That's where we see what our stakeholders are voicing out and try to advocate for those positions to policymakers. And then we have capacity building so that the policy contributions, the continuity of policy contributions. So sometimes we usually experience burnout with the stakeholders, because again, we rely on their goodwill and volunteering out their expertise. And then there's a base, one pillar that acts like a base or an umbrella again for the 3 pillars, that is research. So on research, we inform the platform contribution. It again informs our advocacy and our programs. That's where we advocate on evidence-based policies. So we back up our advocacies on the research that we do. And then research also helps us identify gaps where we should build capacity. So that's about KIPTANET, and I'm going to talk about the work that we did just prior to elections on the role of private companies in respecting digital rights. And this came when we are approaching elections, as I said, and again, there are discussions around SMEs and big companies respecting people's rights started coming out because of certain incidences. I'm going to mention 2. One was on a major telecom company, Orange at that time, an insider breach of user data happened, where a client, a service, what do we call them? The one that faces the customer. Yeah, those ones. So a guy saw a lady coming, approaching, and they were asking some questions about some inquiries on their SIM card. And they were like, this chick looks cute. So what do? They don't ask, he doesn't ask her out that time. So waits for the girl to go, and then goes back to the girl's data, which was in the company's record, gets the number and the home address, and then he's like, what's up, you came over today, can we go out? Yeah, and she was so offended and put it out there on Twitter, and it had a very bad reputation of the company. So the other one was then again around elections. People started receiving targeted messages on where to vote. And sometimes you're living in the urban area, you don't even know where your hometown is, but you would get specific information of your hometown, and you'll be like, now who got this data? Who knows that my rural home is, let's say, in Kirinyaga, a certain county? Now, people started exploring, like, where they've been giving out their data. Remember, this data on their rural homes is in their IDs. So around that, people also started giving out opinions, like saying where they go to these security buildings where they leave their IDs, that's where there could be data breaches, and even on signing apps. So they started asking companies on what they would do and their role in protecting their data. So this is what our work focused on. We did a background research on the environment that the SMEs operate. So one thing that we considered was that SMEs in Kenya are struggling. They are run by young people who still want to get their footing in their careers. So their main concern would be around respecting human rights, but they're struggling to get their businesses running. So when they're doing that, when they're against the law, they only realize that when it gets them, like a cop comes and says, you're on the wrong, we are delicensing you. That's when they realize that they should respect human rights and all that. So in our communication to this, in that consideration, we try to develop some toolkits for them and questions to consider, like how do they get data from citizens, and how do they ensure that their citizens know on what they are going to do with the data? How secure is the data that they collect? Do they train their employees? Even if they're in their company, are they aware of the breaches and what can happen? So on this, we try to emphasize that, yes, you don't focus on human rights because that's not your core business, but it could lead to you not operating. So those were some of the languages about that. Then getting your question on how we usually get this research going to let's say corporates and other stakeholders for policy action. Now, when we do our research, the other thing that we tried to do was to come up with a dissemination plan. So what we do, we try to look. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're going to get to the dissemination in a second, but I have a couple of just quick follow-up questions, which is there a data privacy law in Kenya?
We don't have a data privacy law in Kenya. What we have is a bunch of other laws in other sectors speaking on data.
So how are the SMEs aware of those laws? And then I'm really curious to know how responsive they are to the trust argument in terms of user data, and that they should be trusting it as an economic argument. And also, Julie, to you, the same kind of question, which is, in a lot of company research, we base the premise of integrating it into advocacy that we can create more competitive markets and we can differentiate markets. If consumers are more aware that one company protects privacy better than another, then they might choose that company. So since you both are targeting very different pieces of the market, I'm wondering how well that argument works in both ways. So Liz, if you want to start, and then Julie, I'll come back to you. So how responsive are the SMEs to the idea that if they create trust with their clients by not abusing their personal data and their privacy, that this will actually be an effective, to be a boost to their business somehow?
Okay, for those who go through training on how to run their startup, they usually talk about their core business and how other things, other factors may affect that. So we should know that when you have an idea, you not first start to think around what will affect your idea as you operate. You just move on with it. And that is what we usually see, not just in Kenya, but in other areas as well. So you find that SMEs start looking for this information after they have grown to some certain level. So on the research itself and the toolkit, when we tried to get it out to the SMEs, they were quite responsive, and they were like, if this is going to affect our work that we do, then we should focus some time, put aside some time to it. But again, there are these groups of SMEs, not really SMEs, but startups that were coming up to take advantage of the political time as we are approaching elections. And there was so much opportunity around informing voters on where to vote. And there were very many candidates who were coming up and people didn't know. So they were giving some data on them as well, which the politicians wanted because that was publicity. But on the other hand, they also gave out data on citizens and tried to give them some targeted messages so that they would mobilize their voters to come out and vote and touch on some issues that those targeted groups of voters would likely to respond on.
I was just asking how responsive, so after you published your research, maybe, or even during the research, you obviously spoke with, was it Orange?
We spoke with Safaricom. Orange refused to respond to our questions. They never accepted,
and you spoke with Safaricom.
Yeah.
So how did they receive the idea of the research? I mean, you told us one part, but then also, do they understand or do they agree, or first of all, do they see the possibility of differentiating themselves based on user trust? And then also, when you're educating consumers about the companies, do you see a change in how they behave in terms of choosing based on user trust?
Oh, choosing not that much because markets are not that competitive in certain countries. But on the perception of the research by companies, there has obviously been a huge gap between Orange and Safaricom. Safaricom accepted to meet us, thanks to Click2Net, by the way, which organized a roundtable between the telco and users and civil society organizations, and they were very curious. I mean, they are keen. From what we seem to perceive that they're keen on learning, because, as I was saying, we understand that human rights can be a challenge for SMEs, but also for bigger companies operating in environments where this type of issues had never come up before. So Safaricom is very keen on learning when, well, I would say Orange too, because we're quite surprised and positively surprised to learn that after our research, a few weeks after the research was published, we learned that Orange in Côte d'Ivoire, so you have to understand how Orange works. So Orange is a French global company, the group, which is composed of subsidiaries called Orange in various countries of the world, specifically West and Central Africa. So you have Orange in Côte d'Ivoire, Orange in Cameroon, Orange Sierra Leone, and others. So, and one other specificity is that it happens sometimes that in the board of these Orange subsidiaries sits one representative from Orange Group. So it shows the extent of, the closeness of links. So after our report was published, we were positively surprised to learn that Orange in Côte d'Ivoire was organizing a privacy masterclass and trying to teach the importance of protecting privacy online. So although they won't talk to us because, that's how, companies in Francophone usually react. They're not that open to dialogue, but nevertheless, they listen, and that's very positive, and we're still very open to discussion with them. We continue to contact them, we send them the report, even though they never responded directly to us, but it's okay. And yes, we truly believe that this is a great incentive. There is no other way than when you talk about the effect, certain human rights violations and, non-protection can have, the impact this can have on your business. It's super important.
Great, thanks. So I just want to throw it to the audience to make sure you guys are still with us. And is anyone else doing research right now on, it's a specific question to you, is anyone else doing research right now on tech and ICT companies and their commitments to human rights? Yeah? Let's take one example and then we'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, from Michael Foundation, the writer. I want to ask a question which is going to throw more light to your question.
I actually wanted to see if there were other people in the audience. We'll save questions for the question and answer session at the end. But I wanted to see if others were doing research that they can contribute to the conversation about researching tech and ICT companies. I think here at this table. But we'll come back to you.
Hello, Dr. Robert Moduri from Strathmore University in Nairobi. We are conducting research about the privacy implications of applying biometrics in Kenya's elections last year. Actually, we'll be launching that report next month on 7th May. We've had trouble getting interviews with corporates, with government, with the commission, and everybody seems to be, kind of hands-off. But the lessons we've learned from other research that we've done that has involved these stakeholders is that there's a process to socializing them. And you don't want to be too antagonistic, and you want to make, like I'd say, friends or contacts inside the organizations, then slowly build that up. Maybe also interviews, they will shy away from interviews, but they will want to respond to talking points sent through an email. And maybe you also don't want to formulate issues as questions, like hard-hitting questions, but as talking points. What are your thoughts on this? How did you implement, for instance, in our research, there was political messaging guidelines that were issued by the Cohesion Commission and the and the Communications Commission. So it's about, can you tell us about these guidelines? What did you think about them? How did you go about implementing them, etc.? Then there's been a lot of hard follow-up to make sure that they try to give us some answers. And right now I'm actually sending emails to all these sort of legal officers, technical officers, telling them, at least I gave you an opportunity to respond, right? So when our report comes out, don't say like, we're attacking you or anything like that, they will know who tried to involve them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. So it kind of leads me to my next round of questions for Julie and Liz, which is what are the sort of, well, for Julie specifically, I was like, was it really important to have a methodology to start from with writing digital rights rather than having to create that all yourself? And what was your process in localizing it? Did you use the full thing, or you just selected certain indicators? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that's a very important question, because it has been a huge challenge for us to do this research, because as I was saying, it's the first time, at least for the region, that this had been done. So we didn't know, we knew where we wanted to go, but we didn't know where we would start from. So obviously on this, the ranking digital rights methodology, which is available, which is open source, which can be reused, hacked, whatever you call it, is so helpful, because it is a methodology which was built by several type of actors, so including civil society and academia, and international organizations as well, such as the UN, I mean, councils from the UN. So it's a methodology which is quite comprehensive. It's perfectible, everything is perfectible, but it's quite comprehensive in the sense that it tries to grasp really the essence of the UN guiding principles on business and human rights and translate them into, you know, questions that you must ask, I mean, you should ask when dealing with those issues and trying to translate the UNGP in the tech sector. It has been done in the environmental sector, where the UNGP, well, the issue, the concept of CSR has been quite, you know, it's quite advanced, and it's been 20, 30 years now that it's been going on, but for the tech sector, it's quite new. So it was very helpful to have this methodology guide us on, well, if you want to know if the company is open in terms of in terms of its policies, what do you need to look for? Oh, you need to go and look for the transparency reports, which makes total sense, because that's exactly where the company is supposed to explain to its stakeholders how it has managed to make money and preserve their interest. So that's one thing. And well, in terms of adaptation, so we didn't want to use the full index, because there are certain questions that are not that relevant to the countries we're focusing on. And specifically, there are questions on upholding net neutrality. So, well, at the time we were doing the research, there weren't any products or services that were infringing net neutrality, at least in terms of, how do you call this? Prioritizing content in the countries we worked on. But we chose to focus mostly on the information that is given to the user, because that's how a user makes his or her choice to give his data or not to that operator or the other. So that's why it was important to check, first of all, if as a new user coming to see one of these telcos, as a new user, do I have a full extent of, you know, my rights, of my duties on the network of the operator, and what can be done with my data. So we focus specifically on questions related to access to privacy policy, access to terms and conditions, the precision of those policies, and what else? The font, even the font used, because that's important. We don't think about it, but you know, privacy policy written in font 7. It's horrible. Nobody's going to read it. Or a privacy policy written in legal terms that only lawyers can understand. I feel comfortable, but I'm not sure that everybody would feel comfortable reading those terms. So, in multiple languages, like in Senegal, a majority of people speak Wolof, but there were no terms and conditions available in Wolof. Doesn't make, and a lot of people don't necessarily speak French that well. That's reality. So these are questions that we asked ourselves, first of all, and we hope to adapt be able, depending on resources and opportunities that we have, we hope to adapt a full index in order to try to rank in a country all the companies operating and see how, if the leader, well, the economic leader on the market is also a leader in terms of rights, which we doubt, but yeah, we'll see.
And so we're hearing that like doing this research, it requires a lot of time, a lot of resources, sometimes even socializing the research subjects so that they'll answer your questions. Once we've sort of published this research, once we've gone through all of that, used the methodology, done the painstaking peer review, whatever it takes, how do we make sure that we're not just producing like these lonely PDFs that are sort of condemned to spend eternity on some website somewhere, or like memorialized in a few, 5 minutes of tweets? Like, Liz, tell us really, we know getting research out there can be a challenge. What have your dissemination strategies been? There was talk yesterday in the shutdown session about making research data socially relatable, right? Putting quantifiable terms into stories. What tactics have you found to be reliable in getting the word out and making, and then also making sure that your findings are incorporated into other work?
Okay, a lot of internet work earlier we used to just publish them on the website, and then they would get cited maybe by scholars, but not they were not digestible to policymakers and other actors in the field. And sometimes some researchers from other stakeholders who are members of the community would come and really hit hard on the list and also like affect our relationship with them. So they would not bother to come and look at the work we do. And that is the same struggle that we share with CPIT. So in terms of getting our research out there, sometimes, just like CPIT said, we also try to, after coming up with a research document, we try to get stakeholder views. So if it affects a certain company or a certain stakeholder, we are like, hey, this is what you found out in this research. Could you tell us your position because you got this and this source, or we analyze this and this data from this source? And then they will try to tell us their position, and we tell them this is what we have, and we would like you, we will not share the truth about it, but we would like to give you some position around it, to come and talk to the stakeholders about it, and explain to them, and even say steps in which you're making to correct a certain problem. So one of them, this was not through research really, but some investigations that came up through other stakeholders and came to KICTANET. So when a stakeholder comes and says, hey, KICTANET, some of your members are really hitting us bad, we give them an opportunity for them to engage. So we share information there and then give an opportunity for, let's say, Safaricom to engage. And that way there will be some exchange of opinions around that. And then another thing on dissemination is we try to make our data like visualization of our data so that it's easily digestible. Like when you go to our document, the first 3 pages like tells you all that is in the document. You don't have to read through text, but you just get the happenings with the images around it. And then another one, just an important one, is we try to come up with a distribution strategy.
Okay.
So we drew up a list of stakeholders who the research output would be useful to. And then we get their address and send the physical documents there, because with government in Africa, we still rely on physical addresses. If you send an email, it might end up in a bin. So there are examples like around the election period where there was hate speech and so much of misinformation. The government was trying to contemplate on whether to shut down the internet or try to come up with other measures that would stop that hate that was manifested on social media. So luckily we had given them the shutdown report, and they came across it. Now they were able to call us and tell us, schedule a meeting with us and ask us some of the alternatives around regulating social media environment. And we told organizations, government agencies like NCUC to come and talk to Internet members for that, because the ideas or the outcome from that research came out of crowdsourcing from the list. So we were able to arrange some citizen engagement with the various government agencies, and they came up with policy alternatives around that.
Fantastic. And Julie, you also did that with your report, right? You sent it to the telecom ministry, and what came out of that?
Okay, we didn't send it to telecom ministries, but to regulators, yes. Well, for now, nothing really concrete except that they thanked us and they said that they learned a lot on their own work. So we are exploring indeed avenues for either, we don't know, maybe some training on, CSR in the tech sector, because as I was saying, it's something very new, even very difficult for us as CSOs working on this to understand, not understand, but to fully, encompass in our work. So, so far, reactions from regulators has been quite positive. Reactions from civil society organizations, which could be concerned by this, and I'm talking specifically about consumer associations, which also came to us and expressed interest in, taking the research further, which is ultimately what we wanted, because indeed there is no point in having this research lying there on the PDF. It's more, it has to be very actionable, and the way we really dissected the issues by trying to show that this is a problem if the terms and conditions are not published, because it's a contract, and because when you sign a contract you need to know what you're signing for. Ultimately our aim was indeed to target these consumer associations, because they're older than us, than Internet Without Borders. Their network is established. They even have people in the most remote areas, because they've been doing huge community and grassroots work for so many years. So yes, this is how actionable we hoped, and we are very happy that it has been so far. But yes, it's we hope the beginning of something larger in the tech sector in those two countries, at least.
Fantastic. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I definitely want to leave that for questions and answers, but I also would love to hear, in addition to questions, if you have other suggestions or sort of wisdom from your own research dissemination strategies, if you could share that with the rest of us. So we build sort of I'm making a list here of sort of different tips and advice that we'll share at the end of the session. So please.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to congratulate you for effective research work and the panel discussions. It was informative indeed. Well, my concern was being raised up with the research methodology there, because I want to give more details. The question is that how your selection of the study areas, although we're able to talk more of some, but how do you get the selection of the study areas and the sample selections? Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, can you selection of
the study areas and sample selections. How do you collect the samples?
Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to take a few? Yeah, we'll take a few and then.
All right. Yeah. Frederico Links from Namibia. I'd just like to ask two questions, one for each of the panelists. In terms of the data privacy issue, I find that I recently watched a YouTube discussion about this issue, and in that discussion, I can't remember specifically, who was in that discussion, but something came up in that discussion which struck me. And that is that millennials do not mind their privacy being mined by companies. They don't mind what we consider old, and when I say we, I'm talking about old style sort of advocates and civil society organizations and people in the rights field who make a big deal of we hammer on data privacy and data protections and all sorts of safeguards. And research seems to say that your online generation doesn't mind the whole, they're not all that invested in privacy and their data being protected, but what they want is transparency in terms of what happens to their data. So maybe you could speak a little about that, especially yesterday the Washington Post, or this morning I think, had an article about all the scandals surrounding Facebook and the various other big tech companies don't seem to be affecting their bottom lines. Facebook's profits are up. Facebook's user numbers are up, and people are just subscribing to these services despite all the us hammering on. And international civil society organizations hammering on, they're violating your privacy there. And people just don't seem to care. Because and this is something that and that's actually the statement that the article makes. People don't seem to care how their data is used. So, against that backdrop, this is something that we're struggling with in Namibia as well. How do we frame the data privacy and protection story in a way that would strike at sort of something that is important to the ordinary person on the street. So maybe you could speak to some of that, to that question in terms of your engagements in this region. And then I think this is a related question, but specifically to what KicTheNet has done. What I didn't hear in what you just said is an engagement strategy with the media, specifically. Because it doesn't matter if we're talking to governments, and this is something I'm finding in my own research and so forth. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to regulators and government and whoever. It's if I don't create an information demand in public, the government and the regulator can ignore whatever I'm saying. We're sitting in meetings and everybody's nodding their heads, but we go afterwards, we go back to the way things have been done, because there's no actual demand created. So I just want to know if there's some sort of strategy for developing, because this is something we're busy thinking about, and we're developing specific journalists, because there's a dearth of tech journalism on this continent, I think. So capacitating, identifying and capacitating specific individual journalists in media houses, and trying to get them to show an interest in the tech issues, and then helping them flesh out sort of the issues for the ordinary man on the street. So perhaps both of you can also speak to that. How do you do that? How do you get people actually speak to the man out in the rural areas, the woman out in the townships, that sort of thing, and bring that message down there? Because the research really, as I think Jessica pointed out, otherwise it just becomes a PDF sitting on some website somewhere.
Thank you. One more question and then we'll do a round.
I have the mic already. Okay. My name is Suleiman Bukar, a co-founder of Youth Ambassadors for Peace and Development Initiative. I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the two researchers for conducting this wonderful research, and the presentation was excellent indeed. You deserve to be commended for that. The issue I'm raising here is with regard to the subject of the research. The companies are of course the subject of the research, but I did not hear anything in form of recommendation to the companies You know, the research is supposed to recommend something to the subject of the research, because considering the nature of these research, it will be beneficial to them. So what are your recommendations to the subject of your research? That's the conference. Thank you.
Great. So we have 3 questions. Thank you for that very short, direct question. So the first question was about the sample of research and how you choose the subject areas. Is that right? Study area. Okay. The second was about millennials and their attitudes towards privacy versus transparency, and also how do we do a better job in engaging the media and research, media and journalists with our research. And then the final question was about how did you, if you did, any formal communication with the companies that you were researching. So who would like to go ahead, Liz?
The question on millennials don't care about their privacy, and there was a specific question to us on engaging media, the research, and then there was choosing research areas of study. So my personal opinion is that I take data as not data, but privacy as a choice thing. In that you look at data as currency, and then you look at what service you want to get. Because we've been told that if you're not on the table, then you're in the menu. There's something that is being traded about you. And what I see is that when you are trying to get these services, you try to look at what data in form of currency that is you're trying to give out, and what are you going to get back. If what you're going to give out is going to be so valuable vis-a-vis the service you're going to get, then most likely you'll end up not taking that service, downloading that app. So I'm seeing that there's not really a situation where millennials don't care about their privacy. It's just that what they want from the internet is different, and maybe what they're giving out is different, and their perspective, how they value the data commodity itself is different from us. But in terms of their privacy, yes, they have different attitudes around it, but there are certain data that you won't touch about a millennial, and that is what we need to find out. And then you asked about how we share our research out to media, like how we make them. Another thing is that one of our stakeholders, usually the media companies, and they are on our platform as well. So they usually interact with other stakeholders, and they're active in this in a way that they usually ask for information or clarification around reports that we share. Because remember, Internet platform is basically a mailing list where people put their opinion, like they hang out their opinion out there, and everyone gets to access them. And there's some sort of interaction around it. So we've seen media companies, print media and broadcast, like citing what they get from internet mailing lists. Sometimes they would pick out topics that would trend from the mailing list, and that's how we engage them. And then another thing is that the research that we usually disseminate, sometimes we disseminate through round tables, and we get stakeholders to talk about them. And our main participants in those round tables are usually media, and then we have some small briefing for them, usually, to explain to them concepts so that it is not misreported afterwards. I think I'll leave the other questions to Julie.
Thank you.
So thanks for the questions. Sorry. Just rapidly on millennials and privacy, I totally agree with Liz. I think they have a different relationship towards privacy. And even certain studies suggest that they even develop strategies to trump the data broker, basically, not telling exactly what they like, truly. I mean, having a personality online which is different from their personality offline. So I think there's indeed ways to explore the true relationship between millennials and privacy. But Facebook stocks went up, indeed. But when did they went up? They went up after the hearing when basically Mark Zuckerberg said the social network would work towards more transparency. So indeed, it's not an opposition. You can have privacy by default settings on your products, and at the same time have a truthful relationship with your user by implementing as much transparency as possible in a world where secrecy doesn't make sense anymore, even on your product. So that was just to stress on what Lisa just said. And on the choice of subject matters, well, for us it was quite easy this time for the ranking digital rights, because it's we directly knew what companies we would focus on. Well, as I explained, the rationale was really to have a globalization conversation between what Orange does in its native market in Europe, France, and what it does in a subsidiary in Senegal in Africa, and same for Vodafone and Safaricom in Kenya. So it was not that difficult to identify the sample, and it was not a quantitative research, so we didn't really need a set of population. It was more qualitative, the quality of policies of these telcos. So in this regard, to respond to your question, it's a choice you have to make as a researcher, whether you want to, show the extent of a problem by focusing on the quantity of numbers. That's a choice. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just a choice. Or you want to focus more on quality and ask different types of questions, which makes the work a bit different. But it's a matter of choice, and it's a matter of your strategy. Ours was to invite companies, to change their policies and processes. So, and the last question was on formal comments.
Did you tell the companies before your research was published that you were doing this?
Oh yes.
For review or input?
Absolutely. That's very important to have, in order for your research to be as scientific as possible. You need to have a balance. Of course, as a researcher, you have your opinion, but you have to confront it to those who are actually facing the challenges that you're trying to highlight, and those are the companies, obviously. So it's, yes, we did go to them, ask them for, their inputs. Not inputs, I would say we asked them questions on things we had highlighted, and we gave them the floor to respond. One of them didn't respond at all, which is Orange, and the other one was quite responsive. So it helped us understand certain challenges which, as civil society organizations, we were thinking that they were not that easy to overcome, but they are indeed hard to overcome. We thought they were easy to overcome, but facing the market challenges and policy challenges that telcos do face and that we are not necessarily aware of, it was easier for us to understand the difficulties that they have. And it's also this way that we can build up solutions which are, the most adapted possible, because they were built based on inclusiveness and dialogue between civil society organizations and companies. So.
Great, thank you. I think we're just about out of time. So I wanted to direct you to a guide called Researching ICT Companies. I tweeted it under the IFF 2018 hashtag. It's a new guide that was developed by one of the RDR researchers, Natalie Marichal, and another woman named Sarah Roberts. It's basically, I haven't actually read it myself yet, I will admit, but I think it's basically a lot of what they learned in developing the methodology for the Ranking Digital Rights Project. And they're both academics, so it certainly is informed by their experience as academics. So I highly recommend that. There's another guide that came out recently that's about the research needs for digital rights organizations, which was, I've also tweeted under the IFF 2018 hashtag, that was produced by the Internet Policy Observatory. And Some of your organizations may have been in the census that they did in the survey, sort of surveying needs, and there are a lot of research needs that are identified. So you might take a look and see if it tracks with your own experience. Finally, I just want to summarize some of the advice that we all sort of collectively came up with here, which is in no particular order, and I'll also tweak this later, to make our methodologies open and flexible so that others can adapt them because they are really time-consuming to create. To publish your data, I don't think we talked a lot about this, but I think the more we can make our data open so that others can use it, it's great. Definitely letting companies have a say in how they see your methodology, formal communications with them, giving them the opportunity to comment is great. Socializing them to your research processes, creating toolkits to interact and educate with SMEs and others. Maybe not expecting lots of feedback from the companies, but you can still see some change, as in the Orange privacy workshops, which is fascinating. The idea of after you've published a document, get stakeholder opinions on it, and maybe even get stakeholder opinions during the research process. And then in terms of the dissemination strategies, use visualizations, create a distribution strategy. Make sure you're engaging organizations that are relevant but maybe have been working for much longer, like consumer rights organizations, but maybe don't have the same digital expertise as we do. So I think more of those kinds of partnerships, especially in research and dissemination strategies, are really important. And make sure you have an engagement strategy with the media. So, and again, the idea of making your findings socially relatable as well, not just to the policymakers, but also to the ordinary men and women, or men and women in rural areas, or whoever you think needs to really have the information that you've created. So with that, I'll publish the list. I'd love for others to add their suggestions and ideas. And I want to thank Liz Arimbo and Julia Ono for a really wonderful panel. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience.
All right, again, one more round of applause for them. Ladies, thank you very much for that. We'll keep things moving, and we are still right on time. We're heading into 2 more breakout sessions, so the choice is yours. Gender, Open Data, and AI, Intersecting for Digital Equality, brought to you by Web Foundation, will be happening in this space. And Empowering Human Rights Defenders in Digital Era in Africa with Amnesty International is happening in the basement hall. So we are anticipating going for lunch at 1:30. So please, those who are moderating those panels, let's make our ways to the stages or to the front of the room, as it may be, and let's keep it going. For the panel happening here, it's over to you now.
Yeah. Which one? Don't break. It wasn't like that. I tried. At least I got it. No, don't break. Let me finish charging. I'm sure after this session, I don't take it. No, I mean after the whole. I'm still out. My phone is down.
Are there not too many people in this room? Maybe some people should just volunteer to go out. So they. Good morning, everyone. It's midday already. Oh la la. Okay. I put on my jeans because this session may end up in a fight. So if you're not able to defend yourself, that's why I'm saying pick up your stuff and go somewhere else, just in case it ends up in a fight. Where's Robert? So one of the panelists have gone to pee to come back. I think something bad may happen. Okay, this is actually not a session, let alone a panel. It's something called birds of feathers, like-minded people, people who are interested in the topic of artificial intelligence and the nexus of artificial intelligence, data, and gender. So we're going to start with artificial intelligence and come down if we have time. If it's lunchtime, I'll just leave you here and go for lunch and come back. That's what may happen. This gentleman, the father of 3 daughters, for those who knew him since yesterday, champion dancer, by the way. If Nigeria needs someone to represent. How many of you were there yesterday evening? How many of you saw him? You know, like when the music started, they said dancing, and he raised his hand as if they called him up to the stage. I mean, I went to learn support, just in case, things like this. So welcome to this session at this time. We're going to do some questions. The first is, we need to scope our understanding of artificial intelligence in itself. Have you heard of it? Have you not heard of it? Where have you seen it, or where have you heard it? What are the positive and the negative sides of artificial intelligence? Because most of us who are here are working in the digital rights arena. And then the most important question where we'll bring in our contributors will be that one on what are the positives and what are the negatives, and especially how do we get ready. IFF is a cutting-edge digital rights conference. So we are not coming here to discuss emails and how to do things online. This is the future of digital life. 10, 15 years ago, we used to talk to people about how to be a digital citizen, how to upload, how to download, how to win followers and all of that. But this is not the place for it. This is the place to think forward. This is the place to anticipate. This is the place to catch cutting-edge technology before it arrives. So where are the microphones, the roaming mics? Mr. Cameraman, I will move round because we will come first to the people seated before we get what those people know. Welcome, Robert. We want to know, the question is very easy. Have you heard about artificial intelligence? If you've not heard, it's not a problem. If you've never heard of it, I mean, before I started speaking about it, it's not a problem. Who has heard of artificial intelligence? Where did you hear it? Where have you seen it? If you've seen it, what color is it? Just in case I go out of town and I'm looking for it, I will be able to find it. Do we have someone to hold the mic? I'm happy to go around with it.
Oh, really like this.
Yes, sir.
Can I start? Okay, thank you. My name is Malaku. I'm from Addis Ababa University. I teach computer science. I'm a software engineer. Yes, I know what artificial intelligence is. I teach the course artificial intelligence for the last 10 years. I see developments around the subject. What was the second question? Excuse me. the second question. Okay. Artificial intelligence, initially, it started in the late 1970s, and then the idea was to create an intelligent agent.
1970?
Yeah.
Were you born?
No, I was not born, but
So it's not that new?
It's not that new. The concept is not new, but the actual implementation started recently. It's not, but the science started in 1970, and the idea was to create a machine, an agent that thinks like we do, that rationalize, things like we do, and then does the right thing so that achieve the right, achieve a goal. So whenever you design an agent, that thinks like we do, it should do the right thing so that it achieves, the intended goal. That's what artificial intelligence. But initially, they wanted to duplicate human being, but later on they said, okay, it is not possible to design human being, but we can design a rational agent so that it behaves and then rationalizes the way we do. But completely cannot design a human being.
Melako, can you wrap all of that in 2 sentences? Artificial intelligence is a rational capacity given to a machine.
No, designing an agent, not a machine, in fact. An agent that thinks and does
like a human being. That's not a human being.
It's not a human being.
What is it then if it's not a human being?
It's an agent, a rational agent. And then if you ask me what rational
artificial
agent,
intelligence is a rational agent.
Yeah.
That's what we take from you.
Yeah. Thank you.
It may not necessarily be a machine. It can be software, hardware?
It's both. We can have an intelligent software, or we can have also hardware. So both.
Okay. It's a rational agent. It could be soft, hard, or gaseous. Maybe, I don't know. Ekwe, I'm going to come to you sometime in this round. Anyone has a hand? Yes, sir.
My name is Smith Omotayo. I'm representing Youth for Transparency International. My first encounter of artificial intelligence was at the US Embassy. There was a webinar and a training on artificial intelligence and globalization and how AIs have been used for globalization. Examples were given in the US where you have a centralized system that it's connected to all the database from defense to the internet to the DMV to all the...
Please, what's DMV?
The driver's license database, yeah. So it's supposed to be able to pull information from existing databases to help whatever agency using it to better do their work. For instance, let's say for the security agencies and all that, having like an AI system connected to probably like Interpol, to the various security agencies around the world, you can easily track somebody through traffic light cams, through webcams, through any camera that is available, through the routes, even from ATM machines, through the routes the person is passing, you can track a criminal to their location or to the radius closest to them.
Okay. So tracking entities, whether they're individuals or... Anyone else has heard? Hey, finally a lady has heard. Is it sold in the market?
I'm sure. Now rep and also represent. Okay, I heard it in school first, and also because I worked on a project partially and look forward to do some research in HCI. I want to ask what they have said so far. Yeah, AI is about building intelligent systems. Systems that help you based on data, based on machine sensors or readings to make decisions. You have to achieve goals. Okay.
So they are intelligent systems. They feed on data, and they help make decisions. No, sorry, that I'm learning as we go.
I just wanted to what you said.
Some people here are pretending to be in the room, but they are not really interested. So I'm taking this very personal. Yeah.
So I've just expanded what you said. That's the part I want to.
Thank you. I told you I was coming to you. Okay. Henry, oh, for her. You know, things happen like this. Just in case it's a lack of hands. Anyone has heard of artificial intelligence or has seen artificial intelligence at work? Because what we are doing is expanding our collective knowledge about the subject matter. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to give an explanation about...
Can you please introduce your beautiful self?
My name is Damola Sodoro. I work for the Ministry of Communications. So, for instance, I just want to give a health example of how artificial intelligence would work. So if there was relevant data about environment, cleanliness, or when people bought a particular medicine, a company that sold, let's say, malaria drugs can actually use it to make decisions on production, because you would know that in the rainy season, maybe in a particular area, the gutters do not run freely, and you know that stagnant water increases the possibility of people getting malaria because, you know, the larvae will grow and things like that. So you know that in this season, maybe say from May to August, more people are going to have malaria, so you need to produce more drugs. So that's just an example of how artificial intelligence works. Thank you.
That's a very good one. Anyone else?
I'm a civil servant. I think what I had very close to what we're discussing now earlier in life was about robotics. These are
Robocop. Those days, eh? We used to watch them film.
So these are like machines that are built to perform some acts, some tasks that human beings can also do. And so I learned that, and I was a Nigerian professor, who was in the US, and he was an expert in that aspect.
So, machines that can do stuff that human beings can do.
They are called robots.
I'm looking for trouble now. I told you it was trouble. The sex toys, the sex dolls, those ones that are new now that men are buying, are they part of artificial intelligence? I think some of them can cook.
I mean...
They will kick me out. Anyway, the conference is ending today, anyhow.
Anyway, yes, most of them make use of components of artificial intelligence, and if we say Internet of Things, and you have those toys that have been programmed to do some certain things, and they have some feelings.
I'm talking about the ones that do guys.
Yes.
The ones they want to replace with. That's the thing I'm talking about.
Yes, they have been made to. They have been made. People buy them. I saw one some months.
You've seen one?
Yes, in Berlin, and they showed me what it does, how you can use it and stuff like that. And basically everything is programmed. There's a chip inside there. For it, like for example.
Did you test drive?
No, like there's a chip that you can be able to program, like for example, trying to be correct. Books to go to a certain level or come to a certain level, you know, things like that.
Okay, to lift the press?
Yes. So it's like instead of doing the silicon stuff, you can just use a remote to program the books to the size you want.
Oh, I see.
So it happens. Yeah.
So you've actually seen artificial intelligence?
Yeah, in that aspect.
Okay, me, I've seen somebody has seen artificial intelligence. That's all for me.
I think the concept of artificial intelligence is both software and hardware, as I say. You program and you write the software, and then you need hardware to run the software. So it's both architecture. So you have a software, and then you need the hardware to do it. Suppose you are designing, a machine that thinks we do. So you need to have effectors, right? Suppose I want to grab something, and then you should have artificial legs, artificial hands, and all this. And recently I've heard, they designed the robot like behaving like a woman, so you can have a girlfriend, robot girlfriend, right? And then behaving and then acting the way a human woman do, right? So,
I don't know how women exist as one.
You see different application areas. For instance, detecting a certain patterns, detecting a pattern. So you can write. What makes it intelligent is it can learn. What makes us different from other animals?
Increase its knowledge,
yes.
capacity,
When it
and
faces,
evolving that.
yes, updating its knowledge base. And there is a basic difference between database and knowledge base. Database is not updating itself, but knowledge base is updating the content. If it doesn't know something, then it has to update it. So learn from experience and learn from exposure. So you will see the application in different areas, like automatic manufacturing, like starting from that to intelligent viruses, worms, and then they behave and then they enter into a computer and then behave as if they are legitimate, but they are not legitimate programs. So you can think that as AI program, right? They say in a program and then they trace and you see what data you have in your device. So AI, like we have a broader perspective and then we have also the narrower perspective.
Okay. Anyone else before I go back up? Robert Kitla,
Thank you so much. My name is Vera and I'm from my dream Nigeria. I think I heard artificial intelligence while in school and in a simple term, like you said, a knowledge base, like the name artificial intelligence is like you're having an intelligent idea and you can carry it out yourself. You want, let's say, you don't have to be there to do these things. What you do is just put it in a step-by-step procedure and you feed it into a hardware, and what the hardware does is just to help you carry this. Like I was talking about knowledge-based system where you can have, let's say, a system where people can easily carry out an exam, and what the system does is just you feed in your questions and the system search for you and give you your answer. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. And by the way, what she has on her eyes is a Ray-Ban. That's very stylish. I'm going to come back to you, Femi, Anna. I'll just keep those and come down. Femi, you run one of the cutting-edge technology places in Nigeria where people touch things, look into the future, and try to bring them. What has been your experience so far?
My experience with...
Not with the dolls, with artificial intelligence itself.
So I think, to add to everything that's been said, I think there are many instances of artificial intelligence that's around us that we actually don't see. Artificial intelligence, in my opinion, the way computers work, they feed on data, like someone said, put data in. But if you can get a vast amount of data from multiple entry points, multiple formats, over a long period of time, how do you, from that data, how does a computer from that data, how do you build algorithms that can look at all that data and identify patterns and then take decisions based on the patterns?
What is algorithm?
So algorithm, so every software program you see basically is built around code, and the code basically is what determines the action. If you press the L button, if you press the L button on the keyboard, it shows an L on the screen. An algorithm is the code that someone wrote that says if you press this, and this is the output you get. Now if you have lots of algorithms, which is what's inside programs, and you feed it with lots of data from lots of places, but without necessarily a human being's involvement, for it to identify patterns and then make decisions. That at its heart is what artificial intelligence is about. But I think like gentleman from Ethiopia said, for that system to also then continuously reinforce and learn on its own. So how is that expressed? Every time you're on Facebook, what comes out in your news feed is the result of artificial intelligence. Every time you...
So the Facebook timeline
Yes.
is a visual or the result
of artificial intelligence.
Of data gathered on me over time.
From lots of sources.
Okay.
From the things you click, from the people you are friends with, from the comments, the status updates you put in, from the comments, all those are different data points.
And the places I click like.
Correct. Some of it is even stuff that you can't even remember. You know when Facebook tells you, this time 5 years ago, this is what you did. So a friend of mine was saying, and I was regretting my decision in the last election. And then Facebook had to remind me by showing me the picture of the day after the election when I was rejoicing.
No.
So they use all that data, historical data you put in around the movies you say you like. And that can be used to determine the next thing you experience on the platform.
So does Facebook know who you are voting in 2019?
They probably do.
Do you know yourself?
I probably don't. I mean, there's a popular story of a man who went to Target store in the US. And Target discovered that his teenage daughter was pregnant before him.
Yeah, fathers are always the last people to know.
No, people take care of probably didn't even know. Because Target it's a grocery store. They have information on the things you buy. And over time, from their data, they realized that when women are in their first trimester of pregnancy, they buy certain types of milk and flavor of fruits. Maybe they go from whole milk to skim. And so on the back of that, they can tell in advance, based on your purchase patterns, what is happening to you. So this man goes to Target and he buys stuff, and that information then informs the cashier on what new products should they offer to you. So they offer to him a product that was for pregnant women. Then he freaked out. There's no pregnant person in my house. Until he goes back home and discovers that his daughter is pregnant.
Okay, lesson learned. Men, don't ever go to a mall and say there's no pregnant person in your house. Because you can go home and the person is there.
But that's the result of now what's different in the world today is the amount of entry points for data is massive. The amount of, for us, technology is now a way of life. So we're all constantly adding data to the database. And the database is basically now has more data to use to make those predictions. And those predictions, in many ways, in some instances, can also then be used to influence and manipulate us.
Okay, we'll come to how it's going to go down. Robert, what has been your experience? Can I propose milk to you?
Well, I try to specialize in regulation of new technologies. And the thing is, when a new technology comes out and it brings a vacuum in the legislative frameworks, we have to sit back as lawyers, or in my field,
And we have the generation that gives data in exchange for anything. And it is this data that is being gathered over time, still gathered as we are here. We tweet, we post photos, we share, we click, we like. And this data is being gathered about us, from us, over time. And I don't know what tomorrow will be. So I'm going to come back to us before we get back to these people. From what we've heard, what will be your concern? I'm grateful to the lady who spoke about applications in the health sector, positive applications. I've heard about applications in agriculture, for food production and food security. The gentleman over there spoke about being able to track. And now Anna is talking to us about smart cities. Robert has spoken to us about the biases at the beginning. And Femi is talking to us about the capacity of the machine training itself and doing things that beyond the original thoughts with data that we've collected over time, their capacity to predict us and know the things we don't even know about ourselves. So this is where we are at this time. I'm going to come back to you and ask you, what are your reflections going forward? Where do you see that this will be a positive influence, and where do you think that this will be maybe of negative influence? What are the pros? What are the cons? What should we be watching out for? I work for the World Wide Web Foundation, and one of the things we want to do is to make sure that the internet, the web space, remains a safe, open space and welcoming space for everyone. And if we begin to doubt, if we begin to lose trust in the system from the things I've heard, then maybe we wouldn't be able to have the next 50% of the world come online. If it has become a
I've seen that from Yahoo as well, with a new entity called Oath. And I have questions as to whether or not I have a right to be able to continue using the service, even if I don't want to opt into many of the things. Now, many of them are asking for access to use a microphone or to take pictures or to look at my location. So as a user, is there anything I can do with these companies in terms of completely opting out of many of the things that they want me to opt into, but still have access to using the service? Even though I know it's their service and they have every single right to dictate sort of the terms of use. Where is the middle line for us? I like my Yahoo. I don't want to have to change email servers. I like using Twitter. What else? What's the other option to Twitter? So if I don't opt in, I can't use the service. Doesn't that in a way deny me of some rights as well?
Join your microphone and ask a question. This is not moderate. I'm just adding my voice to the mic. I actually took time to read the Yahoo thing that they sent me. And it says that from such a date, it will be Oath and other companies. And they were going to share data with Amazon. And there's that part that says you can agree later, but you have to get to agree anyhow. There will be a time when if you don't agree, you won't use that service. So must I be part of this? Can't I just go to the village and like forget? I don't know. But I'm adding to what I've learned from, I read those end user services, and I'm as worried as you are. Thank you. Back to my moderation mic. Anyone has a thought this side before I go over? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm deeply down. And my question is, when AI or information is generated by AI, then the AI gets smarter. Then it, let's say within its span of creating such information, it creates an intellectually protected property. Who becomes the owner of such property? And then when that property generated infringes or becomes criminal, who is now held liable for such infringement? Thank you.
This one will happen after lunch because anyway, did you hear the question? Okay. If you give birth, if your AI and your machine make love and they give birth and the child turns criminal, which parent will be jailed? Any hand here before I go across? Okay, sir.
Thank you. For me, I am suggesting everyone to read, to watch a movie on TED.com, a person talking about the one machine. The one machine is the internet. So everybody is relying on this one machine, and then in the future, he's predicting everybody will be connected to this one big machine.
Is one machine the title of the film?
No, yeah, the title of the speech, one machine.
Okay.
So the one machine is the internet. So everybody, so the devices and then everything we have is a window to this one machine. So everybody will be connected to the machine, and then you get everything you want from this big machine. So he's predicting, okay, we're talking about privacy and all these issues, but artificial intelligence is forcing us to be transparent. So the issue of privacy, I think, will be embedded when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we'll be more transparent and we'll be more open. So don't think that you'll be completely, shielded from people who are interested in your data. So I tell you, as long as you are online, and then you are not anymore safe. Safe in a sense. These people are using your data to make some generalization, to do some research. But, well, we can see the negative aspect. But as long as we are online, we should be transparent.
Okay. So, it's already, if you are in this room, you would have registered online and all of that. You would have been tweeting and all of that. So if you are listening to this, it's too late to opt out. That's the message. Sorry. Anyone here?
Okay, this is something that's really concerned for me, particularly. I'm really careful what I do online. I collect my data a lot on my Android phone.
That one.
This
one.
So I'm actually very
Please,
conscious.
how do you clear data on Android phone so we can benefit?
I go to application settings and I clear data. Go to application to settings, I clear some of my data. Sometimes I change my
settings, applications, clear data.
Yes. And sometimes I also change my browser to something that doesn't say what I've done so far. And what I want to say is, I think one of the solutions is know how to get your data. It can go from your camera, from your voice, even how you see the kind. You can just say, talk about pregnancy, and you've never posted it online, and they'll start posting ads for you, like we were talking yesterday. It's that serious. So you could just know the sources. You can help yourself. That's one thing I try to do. But I don't even think it's enough. And also, I think we should be thinking of control. We should be thinking of how do we control these intelligent and expert systems that we're building. They are everywhere. So how do we make sure that we draw the line and they know we have to build. We have to be thinking of how control can be put to these companies or these are all
they said user terms as like quarrel between a man and his wife. The man can film all he likes, he can vibrate and get angry. But until you click I agree, you can't move forward. Oh, and we want to move forward, so we click I agree.
So we should not blame the companies when we agree. Because like I said again, when you are opting for some services ask you to give them access to your data, to your information, to your profile. They will promise they will not use it for something else, but eventually, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, they come back and ask you that they are going to be using it for something else. Just because you want to move on, you click yes and you have access to it. I know on several occasions I had to go into my mail and check the various accounts and things I signed up for and started opting out of a lot of things because at the end of the day, my email was reading almost 18,000 email messages and I was like, who do I know? How am I getting like 18,000?
It's not who you know, but who knows you.
Exactly. So we opt for things like that and we don't remember. Then at the end of the day, you start asking why your quota of your mailbox is almost full when you opted for these things at one point in time or the other. Then back to the AI, it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages.
That's what we want to hear.
Exactly. Like on the security side, tracking criminals and doing stuff, it's on the advantage. But when it now comes to just like what Robert said, where the father had to find out his daughter was pregnant.
And he was going to find out anyhow.
Yes, but I'm sure he would have preferred to find out from his daughter, not from the pharmacy. So we have situations like that. We have AI systems in cars now, where you have cameras in the car watching your back as you're in and all that. All those are benefits and all that. But where there are disadvantages now are like when, like the smart city she was talking about, I know a lot of them have cameras and beacon technologies in place. Beacon technologies are used for push notifications, whereby a small device as tiny as a button or your face is placed on the wall, and once you pass beside it, it's sending you messages based on your interest, based on information it's gathered from all the things you've been doing online, and it sends you adverts, whether you want it or not. Those are some of the disadvantages because you, like somebody else also said.
Extreme marketing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So those are some of the disadvantages as well. Then also when we're now talking about privacy from the government and all that, accessing of your webcam or your phone camera and all that, our databases, let's use Nigeria for instance, most of our systems are not truly secure.
Okay. I saw a tweet on Femi's timeline about someone. I don't live in Nigeria, so I don't have my bank account linked to my phone number, so I will be able to buy credit and all of that. But I hear some people have that. So the guy was saying that if he gets access to your phone, the first thing he does is to buy recharge. When he buys recharge, he gets a message that gives him your bank account balance. And from there, he can progress to getting some money out of your bank account because he can run that through USSD via your phone. And I know that many people are doing phone banking now. And knowing that your phone has already been registered to your name, that it contains your home address and your bank, and you've paid with the same bank card at the pharmacy, in school, at the restaurant. I mean, if someone decides to collect data on you over time, well, he can probably tell from which family your children will marry in 30 years. But I don't know how, I'm still a bit confused because I don't know, is this something I should go into? Is this something I should opt out? And someone says it's too late for me to opt out. I don't know what to do. I'm going to come back to people who are doing this on a daily basis. Maybe they will advise us on what I can do to be ready for this. If you recall, 10 years ago, there were preachers or pastors or holy people telling us the internet is evil, don't go there. But we are already in. It's too late to opt out of the internet. And this morning, even before people know what artificial intelligence is, we are being told that it is already too late to opt out of it because we are already in the digital cycle. So I don't know if anyone else has something to say. Okay, here, and then we'll come back to the contributors.
Hello everyone, my name is Bana from PPDC. So my concerns on artificial intelligence will be around employment. I fear that the machines will take over our jobs. I mean, they're already taking over women's jobs, so that will be my concern.
That one, our job, my sister, our source of income is in fact, it's not the man we're looking for, it's his money. If he invests once and then that is it, then we're in trouble. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Koza Clement. My worry is on the moral standard in society. Some time ago, I looked at my Facebook page and I saw this artificial intelligence machine. It talked about male and female cohabiting, that at some point in time will not need to have boyfriends or girlfriends. So I'm a little bit worried about the future of the next generation to come.
Married?
I'm not married.
Oh Lord, no, that's a problem.
Now, the original purpose is that a man and a woman cohabit and have children. If they are telling us that we don't need to have boyfriend because of heartbreak, because of domestic violence and all of that, I don't understand where that leaves us. Is there any? My question is directed to the three contributors. Is there any regulation to this to see that moral standards in a society are taken properly care of from 5 years to 10 years from today?
Yeah, contributors, the concern about regulation and keeping it within boundaries has come up 2-3 times. The issue on transparency, open source, and accountability has also come up. I'm going to come here. Let's come to you. Who was here? Was it you?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's still on regulation, but I would want to refer to, my name is Olan Tobi. I would want to refer to the incident at Arizona last month where that autonomous vehicle killed a woman and Uber had to pull back all their vehicles, the ones running autonomous. Do we have something like that in Nigeria or Africa? Considering that we are a consuming continent, and before long, once those are out, we will begin to see them on the streets. If not because we need them, because we know they are fancy vehicles. So do we have something like that? Because the accuracy is not yet 100%. There would be false positives and negatives like that. So do we have something like that? And secondly, to Femi, I know CC Hub sponsors and supports startups. Are there benchmarks for these startups? Because with AI and everything coming in, companies want to make money and they would go for the startup that would prefer solutions that would make them earn more. Are there benchmarks that would stand for the customers or we that are buying from them? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start by telling you a story. A couple of years ago, I read an article about a film. It's a science fiction film which speaks about a doctor, a genius, and who invented nano robots which are injected into a human body and they are able to cure diseases. We used to laugh, me and my students, we used to laugh on that. We said it's impossible. But actually, after a short period of time, I think it is possible. And by the end of the story of the film, these nanorobots start by eating the world to survive and to reproduce. So my point is that part of the story has been realized and achieved, which is the robots taking the place of humans, the robots having sensors, the robots knowing more than humans do. So my point is that it's good to have robots doing a lot of things, progressing diseases and all that stuff, but we need also to to create regulations which come this progress, which let's say, restore the importance of humans who created these robots. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Henry Maynard in this room? Yeah, Henry. No, I'm not picking on you, but the one about these rational entities fueled by artificial intelligence committing crimes, and did the police arrest the car, or at least they could trace the car to Uber, and Uber had to react. But in Nigeria, hit and run drivers, they run away by themselves. But my worry is about the jurisdictional underpinnings, because for a policeman to arrest that careless driver and be able to prosecute and get in front of a judge that really knows how to do this, where do you think we are at the moment in terms of policy and jurisdictions on AI? If you don't know, say you don't know, because I don't know.
The truth is that the law always comes after certain happenings. The law has never preceded such actions. So what is being discussed is, yes, artificial intelligence may be helpful in crime detection, but it's not going to be as useful in crime prevention. So the understanding of even many cameras does not eliminate crime, because then people just run to where there are no cameras and commit the same crime. So jurisdictional issues are going to remain, and that's why you would notice that in most cybercrime laws, most countries in the region are putting in mutual legal assistance teams and extradition clauses, which begin to help in creating a sort of relationship, so that if that car were manufactured in Nigeria, then the manufacturers in Nigeria would begin to take responsibility for whatever accidents it caused in New York or in the US.
Listen, I was born in Aba, in the eastern part of Nigeria, and I know that our Igbo brothers can manufacture anything. They just buy the original, put it aside, and then redo it. So I don't know when artificial intelligence cars will be done in Nigeria, but it will certainly be done in Aba. I'm going to come back to our contributors for your thoughts on all of this. Robert.
Okay, I think there's a lot of things that we've talked about. I don't know where to start, but I'm going to try to summarize and hopefully I touch on everything. I think the first thing to talk about is agency. I'm grouping it as agency, but the idea will come across. To quote from Julie Owono in her session where she said, we need global rights by global services, we need global rights from global services by global platforms. So the idea that Africans don't care about privacy, young people don't care about privacy, those are myths that have long been demystified. And we need to operate on similar standards everywhere. What we don't understand is the West has stronger protections, but we also enjoy the services they have. So next month, the GDPR is coming into effect, right? One of the things strongly opposed there is automated decision making. So that algorithms are going to make decisions about sensitive issues regarding your health, regarding your finances, regarding your job, is going to be stopped. And people are going to be given the option to opt technology. They will look at the functionality. And if you have invented or Femi has programmed an algorithm to do something that is illegal, he ends up having the agency. They say this functionality was enabled by a certain person, so Femi will be culpable, okay? On the other thing about privacy policies, I do agree, this is a big issue. And the first thing is, okay, like Jessica said in her session, these global platforms will always say, our privacy policies are evolving. We are evolving our policies. So they will not want to admit liability in failings. They'll just say, you know, we keep improving. But people have come out and said the amount of money you invest in your technology the amount of money you invest in advertising is not commensurate at all with the amount of investment you have in making sure that privacy is ensured, right? And data protection. And that's for an outright commercial interest. So with the Cambridge Analytica saga, it's very clear. Self-regulation has failed. In regulation, we have three types of regulation: self-regulation, core regulation, and state regulation. Self-regulation is where you regulate yourself as an industry. So they have the freedom to create those tiny font privacy policies. When you come to core regulation is when the government starts saying, I think this is becoming an area of concern, and they come in with some sort of soft guidelines or things like that. And then when it fails entirely, that's when you have state direct regulation. And now it's very clear, even Mark Zuckerberg has admitted, it's not about whether they should be regulated, it's how they should be regulated. And that brings me to the final issue about the movie about one machine or movies like The Matrix. Even though Minor is saying that, you know, we can use technology right now for detection, but we can't use it for protection, I want to make you aware of what we're doing in legal informatics. So there's a very small section working very hard to develop an area of a field called normative multi-agent systems. So when you have artificial agents working together,
What is normative whatever?
I'll explain. So normative multi-agent systems. Multi-agent systems is basically you have this artificial agent. I explained at the beginning, human agents versus artificial agents. So artificial intelligence will use artificial agents. So you have ecosystems or separate worlds where all agents are just artificial. So what does that mean? We cannot continue existing with just written laws, right? In Africa, we don't even have them. But in elsewhere, where they are existing, we are moving from legislative text to prescriptions, which is basically this company should do this or something like that, internal policies, to system protocols, where we're going to have legislation as protocols embedded in the algorithms. So we are developing tech that has a normative layer. Normative means norms, laws. Norms that will regulate the agents, okay? So we're moving to a very complicated area where we're going to be able to say, for instance, in banking, we're starting to have algorithms that can detect outlier transactions and say, this is not a transaction in the norm, this is not according to the pattern, and it stops that transaction. And that's why sometimes you'll be somewhere and you're trying to do a transaction and your card doesn't work, but you don't understand the tech behind it. So we are also in the legal field moving to be technical, but we will not wait for governments to enact legislation and things like that. So there's a lot of work going on in legal informatics about formalizing, which is basically trying to automate legal interpretation, legal argumentation, being able to have systems that can also encompass legal reasoning. That is the hardest work in that layer of work. Right now you also have systems that are trying to make sure that laws are machine readable, so there's a whole continuum of work going on, but ideally that is where we're moving.
Thank you very much. That's a whole lot to chew on, and I think we'll be doing that over lunch. Anna, can you help me put up your mic?
So I'll leave my last words, I guess, will be around the research the Web Foundation has conducted last year on starting the policy dialogue on AI in Africa, which Robert provided his expert input on. So some of the findings we found across Nigeria and South Africa are as follows. Local knowledge will allow relies on global trends. So this means that we need as much research and work being done on the continent, because a lot of the examples I've heard, the ones that I've given, have been from North America so far. The way those systems are implemented there are being watched closely, but they're not being watched closely here, and that's really important to do. We can't forget that connectivity infrastructure and other challenges may limit local and AI entrepreneurship. So we still have to go back to the basics in terms of connectivity. Government engagement in the promotion of AI research and use is low, so we need to get them on board in terms of regulatory frameworks and policy angles that they will actually take on once this research is done by civil society and others. Networking events like this one are important opportunities for knowledge sharing and collaboration to, just start with the basics. What is it? How can we go forward? There's the data science, Lagos Data Science Nairobi, Machine Intelligence Institute of Africa. These are more specific niche technical bodies, but we can go beyond that to talk about AI.
1 second, Anna. If anybody, Benga from Paradigm's end or any of the partners, if you know any artificial intelligence events, opportunities, please tweet with IFF 2018 so that we all benefit from it. If you could also tweet Anna and whatever the Web Foundation research is, so we all extend our knowledge together. Thank you.
So women remain largely excluded from the AI field. So this is not just exclusive to AI, it's in tech as we know it. So we do have to make sure that this gender imbalance becomes balanced as these technologies will reverberate through the job market and can foster application design, we'll end up reproducing and exacerbating the problems of unequal society. So that needs to change over time. On open data, public data is in short supply. So machine learning by definition requires data. So how can we incentivize governments to produce NSOs, statistics bodies, more data, not just more data, but higher quality, so that's integrated systems. That way I can go with force or an open algorithm or push for that dynamic forward. And last but not least, more needs to be done to develop and create local AI talent. Something that we haven't tested a lot is data ownership, where these algorithms come from, who builds tools, what kind of global centers or investors are you learn these models and you take them on to local needs. They meet your local needs, they limit you, or, the tech, you go into the technical conversation on the data on themselves. Could you build something in Nairobi or in Abuja, more suited, answering your fintech, ag, or health needs? And what does this look like? We don't know that yet. I'm really interested to see that dynamic change data ownership.
Bees in hives, and they were using to improve the ecosystem until someone hijacked the system that ran the bees and turned them into killing machines.
And then last month, we see a news article that a company has patented the IP for those autonomous nanobees. So what we thought was fiction is suddenly becoming reality. And that's the next bit that I think is important. IP. IP. The amount of IP that global corporations have that influence the evolution of those systems in terms of data that's being collected and what they can do with it is immense. And like was mentioned in the previous session, unfortunately, you cannot FOI a private corporation. It's corporate secret. You cannot do a freedom of information request for a private corporation. How they use those technologies, we don't know. And the bit that worries me at our own end, someone asked about what we're doing with our startups. Unfortunately, in the startup game, capital is critical. And at the moment, the bulk of the capital that is financing startups in this part of the world are coming from outside the continent. But one of the preconditions that come with the law of the capital, because the investor wants to be able to get his cash out, is that you have to wind down your local corporation and come and start a new corporation in our own market. And your IP has to be domiciled. So your business is still operating here, still being used as a tool to generate.
To take the discussion forward. It is not a tech thing. It is not only a software issue. It's not a hardware issue. There is policy involved. Of course, big money is in it. There is the jurisdictional aspect. But one thing, I know you are depressed, I know you are hungry, but just know that you are not opting out of it. It's too late for you to opt out. But I think that the data that's more important now is the data on lunch, which happens where it happened yesterday. Okay.
So one last thing. I stumbled across a report that was that today or yesterday by ASCO 19 and Privacy International on freedom of expression and privacy in the age of artificial intelligence. I'll tweet it at the IFF and I highly recommend that you look at it. I started reading it and it's fascinating.
Tweet anything you can so we can all increase our knowledge. Thank you very much, folks. I think we will still do the photo. Are we still invited for lunch?
Yes.
Did you get the small paper that allows us? That's the data we need.
I'll give you the details now. All right, so again, a round of applause for our panel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the conversation. Many of you would have gotten the flyer with information from the Web Foundation, so please go through it and look at those issues that were raised in some of the conversation pieces. All right, so we are heading to lunch, and that is at 1:30. You don't have meal tickets, but you will be looking for Sheyi when you get to the restaurant. Sheyi's wearing black and white and has braids. Braids, right? Correct. Okay, yeah. So Sheyi's wearing black and white and has braids. So please look for Sheyi. She'll give you your meal tickets. Right after lunch, which will end at 2 o'clock, so we need to do this very quickly. There is another group also using the space with us. We have Detoxicating the Net, addressing hate speech and gender-based violence online, and that will happen right here, starting at 2:30. And then the second breakout session is Building a Healthy Internet in Africa, and that happens in the basement hall. We will all come back at 4 o'clock for the last main session, which is how to ruin elections in Africa. So please go ahead, have an idea what breakout session you want to be part of later. Then 1:30, lunch is served. Also, don't forget sponsored delegates. Please make sure you get your receipts to the desk so that your payments can be processed as well. So spend a few minutes stretching your legs, making contact, but 1:30, lunch is on in the restaurants. Thank you.